Welcome again to South Beach Sessions. How can you not smile when you see this face, when you hear this voice? Ron Funches, you've seen him in a number of television shows, movies, Loot on Apple TV Plus now. He has his own podcast, Getting Better with Ron Funches, because he wants people to work toward the things that they love in life. Who can't use more of that? Welcome. I'm happy to see you, and I'm thrilled that you're here in studio with us.
Thank you, Dan. What a great intro. Wow. You really are a professional who has done this for years, but does not seem to be as bitter as you appear from the outside. Because I've worked with plenty of people who are bitter, and then that usually means that they don't do your intro properly, or your producers work very well, and they did the great stuff. Either way, good job.
I'm glad that we welcomed you properly. What did I miss? What should I be telling them about people that you're presently working on that you're most excited about? Because the podcast, I don't know what it means to you personally, but the idea of getting better is something that you're working toward in a way that's very public.
Yeah, no, it means a lot to me. It's besides my stand-up, it's the thing that I get the most joy from and the best response from. People, before I did the podcast, people would tell me, I think you're funny, or I like you from this show, I like you from this bit. And then after my podcast, I've gotten responses like, hey, I've started going to therapy because of you. I got out of a toxic relationship. I had one gentleman who actually works at this restaurant that I wear. And he told me, he's like, you saved my life. I was going to kill myself. And I started listening to your podcast, and it slowly made me start realizing how unaligned I was on my path. And now, go to therapy, started doing more hobbies. And he was like, I don't know if I had ran across that podcast, if I would be here. And those type of things mean a lot to me.
It's one of the great joys of what we do, that kind of intimacy that I guess you can't get from acting or even stand-up, where you're revealing so much of yourself that people feel like they know you and are willing to follow you on some life advice stuff because you're showing so much of yourself.
Yeah, and I always try to come from, I'm not perfect by any means. I'm always talking about my issues with overeating and my weight battle, which has been back and forth since I was a kid, and just general self-esteem issues. So I'm never coming from a place of like, oh, I look at me, I came from nothing and now I have a house and I do well and I'm doing. It's not that. It's just like I made a lot of these mistakes. I'm constantly working on getting better. I think what really made me start it was that I would always post these affirmations on Twitter. It came from a thing I did with my son before bed, where I would tell him, every night before bed, I'd be like, you're brave, you're strong, you're kind, you're a good person, and have him repeat it back to me. And I started to kind of do those on Twitter, and I would get a good response. And I was noticing the more successful I got, the response was changing from like, oh, thank you, this is great, to like, oh, of course you can do it, you got money. Oh, of course you feel that way, you got money. And it was just like this thing of, I feel like there's a disconnect sometimes between people who think they've made it and people who feel like they'll never make it. And the whole Getting Better podcast is about showing people that there is no making it, that there's always more challenges that come up, and we're always on a path to try to be our best selves, or at least I think we should be.
You are pretty much always, that I've seen, espousing positivity. There's a need for it right now. There's an absence of it. Where does it come from for you?
From the absence of it. That's a lot of how I write my comedy as well. When I got started, it was that I wasn't seeing the style of comedy that I wanted to pursue and that I enjoyed. When I started, there was a lot of aggro comedy. I believe Louis C.K. was probably at the height of his popularity at that time. And a lot of my bits were generally me writing the opposite of what I heard him say when he would talk bad about his family or about his kids. And I knew how much my son had inspired me and how my life would be different and worse without my son. And so I was like, let me write jokes about that. And so that's kind of how I've always been. And I think it's easy to be positive when things are going well. That's easy. It's better to be positive when when it's needed, when things look rough. I mean, up until a few weeks ago, a lot of my friends were so scared and depressed, thinking that it was going to have to be Biden or Trump, you know. And now to see such a shift that no one expected, to have this new sense of people being excited about being able opportunity to make history and make changes, and have a gentleman that looks kind and helpful. It's all these things that people are excited about, but you know, you have to make it between those days, and for that you need faith and hope, you know.
You've mentioned Malcolm now a couple of times. You had him when you were about 20, right? You were a very young man. I have some friends who have children with special needs. That can be a challenge at any age for a parent. What kind of challenges did that present for you at 20?
Oh, I mean, it was, I don't know how I survived, to be honest with you. That's what a lot of my friends, when they remind me, when I, like, you know, get down, or I'm mad about a gig, or I'm mad about an audition I don't get, they're always like, look how where you are from where you came from. And yeah, having my son, first of all, you know, I just knew, I was excited to have him when he was on the way, even though I knew I was young. I didn't have any job prospects. I thought I was going to be married and have this family, this young family, and we'd grind it out and figure it out. And as soon as I found out that he had autism, it was one of the biggest mental shifts for me, because I think, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, when you have a kid, and especially if it's a firstborn boy, you get all these expectations about reliving your life through them. And like, I was like, oh, he's going to go to college and play basketball and do all these things. And that's simply hearing the word autism, I was like, oh man, I can't place any expectations on him. And that's the biggest lessons I always say is that biggest thing my son taught me is to lose all expectations but keep all hope, because there certainly was a time where I thought he'd never say I love you, or go to school, or be potty trained. And now to see the kind, driven, confident gentleman that he is, and he's, you know, he came out on the road with me for this weekend. He's going to come to a couple shows, and just seeing how he treats people and how he treats himself it's like my biggest accomplishment for sure.
How has he changed you?
Patience, for sure. Drive, confidence, just belief in myself. When I was younger, I feel like I always had low, like I didn't need much. I was happy sleeping on a mattress with no box spring, no sheets, no real pillowcase, taking gravity bong hits, writing jokes with a negative bank account. And then when I found out my son was coming, all those things, suddenly I could see the downside of them. I could see that this wasn't a way to live. That would have been, it was okay for me, but it was not okay for my son.
What has your viewpoint on love, how has that changed because you are perpetually and unconditionally pouring yourself into the formation of this human being?
That's a good question. I mean, love for me has changed in a lot of ways, and how I think I was very naive about love. Partially because of my son, I think, and pouring that amount of love and receiving that much of unconditional love back from him. I think that was immeasurable, especially when I was coming up with comedy. I think a lot of my friends are always like, you'd be an asshole if it wasn't for your son, because he's always kept you balanced. He's always, if I have success, or I remember the first time I did the Conan O'Brien show, and it was like the biggest dream for me, and I wanted him to sit and watch it with me, and he was 3 and he could care less, and just like, and I was like, no, you're gonna sit, watch Daddy's on TV, you're gonna sit. He like eventually just got up, took his diapers down, and just started rubbing his butt on the TV on my face, just to kind of be like, look, no, I'm going to do what I want to do. And it was this nice lesson of like, oh, that doesn't matter. What matters is taking care of you. And so that's really, I think, taught me the priorities of love, and taught me what true love is. And then, just getting divorced this last couple of years have been like, oh man, I get confused about love. I get overly invested in people sometimes. I've learned to love myself a lot more this last couple of years, and um, in turn a lot more people down, which is fun.
It's hard to imagine you as an asshole. It is. I don't know what what was happening in your life before then that people would be comfortable saying that of you. That if you didn't have Malcolm, you might be be
No, I
less.
mean, no, you're right. I'm a generally sweet person. I'm not like, devoid of all emotions for sure. I certainly get frustrated. If you want to see me be an asshole, it is a thing of like, press me about anything about my son. That's the quickest way to get it from me. I've done some, how people will be. I've done some things online, and then people try to troll you, and then sometimes they go up to my son and go to his disability, and sometimes say some really, really rude things, and they don't think you're a human. And then, but some people have caught me on the wrong day to where I then search their internet and profile and go find their LinkedIn and go find their work phone number, and then I call them, and then I tell them, hey, before you say such mean things about special needs children, maybe you shouldn't be so easy to find for a person who you don't know the mental state of. So I try to let them know that there is a balance with me.
What can you tell us about your upbringing that represents sort of the landmarks of shaping you?
Oh, I mean, I grew up, born in California. My mom and my dad divorced when I was very young, when I was like 4 years old. Moved to the south side of Chicago. My mom was a single mom. She lived with my aunt, and we lived with my cousin. So I just lived in a house full of girls. I think a big part for me was living in Chicago for that time period. We didn't have much money at all, but it's a lot of free activities in Chicago, a lot of festivals, a lot of music, a lot of comedy. So my earliest memories were like going to the Taste of Chicago, going to jazz festivals and seeing like Muddy Waters and BB King when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I always say, I remember my first concert was seeing Morris Day and the Time. And it wasn't particularly Morris Day and the Time that inspired me. It was that they had an opening act who was a comedian named Shucky Ducky, who was like a Chicago legend. And seeing the way that people responded to this guy telling jokes on stage when I was a little kid let me know that there was power to that. And then I started kind of telling jokes when I was young. And my mom was, single mom, stressed out sometimes, bit of a disciplinarian and a spanker at that time. And so I remember one time she was planning, we'd done something, me and my sister, and she was planning to spank us. And I started making fun of her to my sister, waiting for our punishment. And then we're waiting and still making fun of her. And my sister's laughing, and my sister's laughing. And then I hear behind the door, my mom's laughing. And I'm like, oh. She comes in and she's like laughing and she's kind of crying about the whole thing, and she just hugs us, and then the punishment's over. And I'm just like, oh, there's a power to making someone laugh. She forgot to punish us. And I think that moment, I was just like, oh, there's something here if I can learn to use this.
And that's the first time you sort of remember laughter having that particular power? Because I was surprised to read you seem too young to have I Love Lucy as an inspiration.
Yeah, no, my mom always says that. Yeah, she would always say that when I was a kid. She was like, you like watching stuff older than me. But I just, I'm a different type of dude. I just kind of, grew up in Chicago as well. Really, a lot of gangs, a lot of violence, a lot of gunshots and stuff. And I think the quaintness of that 1930s, 1940s Lucy stuff was made the world seem nicer to me. I mean, I notice it now when I live in Studio City now, and it reminds me a lot of like watching I Love Lucy, because it's just quaint and people waving as you walk by the street, And so I think there was just something always about that, and the rhythm. I was always a fan of like just hearing that pop pop boom and laughter. I love that rhythm, and I think you could hear that in Lucy so easily that I fell in love with it.
What was your first big break?
My first big break was probably the first time I did Conan O'Brien. Yeah, like 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I was still in Portland comedy, and it was a big break in many ways because it was my first time doing national TV and doing jokes on TV. Conan is one of my, to this day, biggest mentors and biggest heroes in comedy. And to hear him, like the audience laughing was great, but to hear him laughing behind stage and just to sight hear him really like hit his desk about a joke, that was the first day I was like, oh, I could do this for a living. And then on the other side of it, once I went back home and I'd done this show and I was so poor and I was like, this is it. Once we get this, my career's going off. And I had to just go back and do open mics in Portland. And no one had seen me perform on the show. No one gave a crap. It was a quick eye opener of like, oh, I have to just enjoy the whole ride of this because there is no making it. So that was a very formidable experience for me.
Can you explain to folks how improbable it is to go from where you started with your mother as a social worker in Chicago to where you've gotten?
It's hard to explain it to me because I will try to undercut it and be like, anybody can do it. You could do it. If I did it, you can do it. And over the years, as I get older, I have to be like, whoa, wow. Especially now that I'm 40 and I have my younger son, and I'm like, oh my God, the amount of energy it takes. And the fact, I grew up single mother household. My mom ended up in an abusive relationship and having to ship me off to my dad in Oregon. And that's where I was lucky that I met so many great comedians, and there was no type of style that was predominant there yet. So you could really just be yourself. And that was, I think, especially, being 20, the idea that like, hey, just be yourself and work on you and work on your voice was something I really needed at that time. And having a special needs kid when I was 20, getting divorced right away, just being like having no money, negative bank account. One time when I was working comedy, on a good year, I made $7,000 in a year. And I was like, this is horrible. If it wasn't for my son, I would not have made it. And it wasn't for his disability, we wouldn't have made it because he had Social Security. So often he paid the rent. Like there were months where I did not pay the rent, but my son paid the rent, which is why now he gets any video game that he wants. So
do you have moments in there where you wanted to stop doing it?
Oh, for sure. Many times, whether it was a bad audience. Sometimes you perform in front of people that you wouldn't want to break bread with, and then you go like, why am I letting you judge me when I wouldn't even shake your hand if I saw you on the street, and when you have that and you're in bad places and there's racist people or whatever, and they want a certain type of comedy and I'm trying to work on my style, it makes you want to quit. There are times my mother was kind of done helping me with my phone bill or things like that, and having my son, and having those questions with myself, because she would on occasion be like, are you doing the right thing? Are you being a responsible dad right now? And I'd have to like be like, I don't know. I feel the progress. There's just not money yet. I'm getting respect before I'm getting the money. But I'm like, but I'm getting respect from these great people, these people who I grew up watching, the people who, before I started comedy, I was watching their specials, and now they want to take me on the road. And so I'm like, something's happening, something's coming. I just have to be patient. But there are certainly times where, I tell myself that now, like, I was lucky. I was 20 when 23 when I started comedy, because there's no way, like, if I was in my 30s or 40s, would I've been like, you know what? I got my son. He's got autism. You know what I'm going to do to get us out of this? I'm going to start stand-up comedy, It seems like a horrible idea, but it worked.
It did work indeed. When you talk about your self-esteem issues and you say You had to go to Portland to get out of the environment where your mother was in an abusive relationship, or that your parents divorced so young. Have you gotten to the roots of where the self-esteem stuff starts? It's in there, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we get in there. Yeah, me and Donna, my therapist, we dig deep. Yeah, mostly, and I don't want to, because my mom will probably listen to this, so I don't want to be rude to her, but we've discussed this as well. But and I've learned to give a lot more grace being a parent myself. But my mom was stressed out. She was single mom, 2 kids, no money, no help with child support or anything like that. She was doing it all on her own, and I think she had the stress levels made her not able to be as patient as a parent that you need to be sometimes. And so she'd be way more of a disciplinarian, and then there's just certain times where I felt like more of a burden on her than a kid, than as someone that she enjoyed. And so I think I carry that with me, that sometimes I feel like a burden. I feel that people don't want me around, or that I'm more of a hassle than I'm worth. And I've learned, I still have to battle that, but I know that that's a false narrative.
In retrospect, she was just scared, right?
She was just very, very scared. Yeah.
You can only see that as a parent.
Oh, truly. No, yeah, that's what they say. But it worked both ways. Like, I learned to have so much more forgiveness for my mom, and then I have a lack of forgiveness for my father for some reason, because I know the struggle, and I know how hard it was for me to be a dad and still be there every day while trying to do comedy. And so I kind of have this, like, oh, if I did it, why couldn't you do it?
Tell us about going to Portland. He was a pipe fitter, right? Mm-hmm. So you go and live with him at what age?
I go and live with him at 12, 13, yeah.
And what was that change like, going from Chicago, which has its set of problems, to now you're one of the few black kids in an all-white school, right?
Yeah. Oh,
I don't know if that was the greatest hardship involved in your social setting outside of the home, and I don't know what were the greatest hardships inside the home.
No, there's a lot of things going on, but yeah, it was luckily there was a show which was at that time a comic strip called The Boondocks that was popular, that kind of mirrored what was going on with my life, where it was 2 brothers that lived in Chicago, and they moved to this place called Woodcrest, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what my life is now. I went from, as you always remembered, because we drove and you could feel the difference because we're in Chicago and there's listening to rap music on the radio, and the further we go west, the more it's harder to find a rap station, and they all suddenly start turning into country stations, and you're like, oh, this is going to be different. And it was very different. Yeah, dealing with some racism, people, writing the N-word on my gate and stuff. And, just general racism that you would deal with at that time. But on the positive, it taught me so much about being true to myself. Because what was cool in Chicago was not cool in Oregon, and what's cool in Oregon was certainly not cool in Chicago. And I learned to be around all different types of races. I just think one thing that serves me so well now in my comedy and my travel is that I'm comfortable most places. I've been in trailer parks, I've been in the projects, I've been in a private jet, I've been in mansions, I've been everywhere. And I'm comfortable everywhere as long as you're a nice person. I don't care what color you are, I don't care where you came from. As long as you treat me with respect, I'll treat you with respect. I don't try to judge anyone until I actually meet them and shake their hands. And so I think that's what Oregon and moving around taught me a lot. The negative was that my dad was also in an abusive relationship at the time. So I went from like the frying pan into the fire of just this untamed household. But of all my issues that I have with my dad, I always still lead back to this thing that he saved my life at that time, because I don't know how things would have turned out for me if he was not there for me then. He may not have been there other times, and he may have had issues, in his own life, but he was there for me then, and I really needed him.
How did you get to the point of the decision getting made that you have to go to Portland? You have to leave.
Oh, it's just my mom was in this relationship with a gang member named Do Dirty, which I don't recommend. That is a bad name that tells you right away that they're not nice. Do Dirty.
It does telegraph certain things.
Yeah. Not an upstanding gentleman. And so and so she was in that, and we knew him since I was about 8, and he was getting more and more abusive, both, in every way, verbally, physically, all of it. And so when I was young, it was more fearful. And then as I'm getting closer to 12, 13, I'm putting on size. And so I'm starting to encourage these altercations. And so I went from going to school and just, being an A and B student to like not caring about school and just coming home and trying to fight my mom's boyfriend every day. And so it was a real detriment to my schooling, a real detriment to my focus. Also, my mother has spent the prior 7 years scraping to get us to go to a Catholic school. And then in 8th grade, she couldn't afford to. And so I had to go from this school that I've been going through my whole life. That was, a little bit nicer, not the nicest school, but you know how Catholic schools are a little bit more prone to being at least somewhat softer. And then my 8th grade, they're like, all right, go into this inner city public Chicago school with metal detectors and no one knows you. And so I was like, oh, I'm easy prey. Everybody went to school with, they all know each other but me. And I'm showing up with my little wispy voice, which sounded weirder then because I hadn't gone through puberty, and just chunky and sweet. And I hated life every day in that school until I got out of there. I had to get out of there. I don't know. Yeah, it was a horrible situation.
Were you getting beat up?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Beat up, pennies thrown at me, just threatened all the time. Just not a good time. And I didn't have any friends anymore. All my friends went to this other school. So
I'm sorry. You found forgiveness for your mother in adulthood, wherever it is that you needed to, but have not been able to find it with your father. Is the difference that your mother, she cared, she was trying, she was doing her best? Is that the difference on forgiveness?
I think the difference is the continued effort. The fact that we've had bad points in our relationship. There were parts there where we didn't speak for months, when there reached a point where she was telling me to quit comedy and to basically go move back to Chicago. She wanted me to work at a grocery store. She's like, you can do comedy on the weekend if you really want it. And I was just like, I can't do that. And I have my own doubts, and I can't talk to anyone right now who backs up my doubts. So either you support me or we can't talk. And she was like, I can't support you. And I was like, well, we can't talk. So we didn't talk for months, and it was one of the worst. I would cry. I would see these like Sara Lee coffee cakes that my mom used to make when we were kids when I was at the grocery store, and I would just start crying because I missed my mom so much. And with my dad, it always just was more like he was there for that point. And then we've had our own issues. Like I had an interview in the New York Times where I'm about to repeat the joke and get myself in trouble again.
Mom, it's just for the context of the story. He's not doing this to bother you. It's just because the audience needs the context because we're doing this biographically.
I did a joke I was in the New York Times. They asked me about my family, and I said I have a mixed type of family where my mom's side is doctors and lawyers, and my dad's side is gang members and people who claim to be rappers but are actually gang members. And they did not like that joke at all. So, mostly because it was pretty accurate. And they were like, no, it's not true. Your other cousin drives a bus. And I was like, you're not helping.
There's one outlier driving a bus. Yeah.
And so that caused a rift with me and my dad's side of the family for a while, some of which has gotten repaired. I have some cousins that are very nice to me. Actually, my cousin who's the most in jail is the one who's the nicest to me and supports me the most. And he was like, you were telling a pretty accurate joke. So why are they mad at you? And just my dad, not to put all his business out there, but he had, multiple kids from different relationships. And I always just, at some point when I had my kid, I was just like, oh, I don't feel like he protects in the way that I want to protect. And so I just kind of was like, I need to disconnect from that. And then he's been okay with that for the most part. Like I have my 2-year-old younger son. He's never met him. And so to me, that kind of was like the last straw for me, because I just was like, oh, looking at my son, I'm like, if he, no matter what our relationship was, if I knew I had a grandson, I'd be like, hey, for this day, time out, I'm going to come meet my grandson. I need to. And that's never happened. And so that's probably where there's no forgiveness.
I have not known that I am strong until recently, going through an assortment of adversities over the last 5 years. It's not something I had examined before, but I feel like I had never had my strength tested, so I didn't think that I was strong. You know you're strong, right?
Now, I also did not know. I actually go back and there are some jokes that I wrote about me not being strong, about how I'm more of like a pug on a decorative pillow. And now I go back and I see those jokes and I hate them, because I'm like, you didn't know how strong you were. You didn't understand how much you had accomplished and how much you've been through. And now I do. Fortunately, I've had to go through more stuff. That this divorce has been absolutely terrible, and really made me second guess my ability to trust myself, trust people, my ability to discern people, whether they're good or bad. I had to question all of that. I had to lose a bunch of friends. But from all of that and through all this is like, yeah, I do know I'm very strong. Tremendously strong. I do know that.
But also in the last couple of years of struggle, because you've mentioned the divorce now a couple of times, but you said in the last couple of years you've gotten better at loving yourself. Mm-hmm. How?
Oh, by setting boundaries, by doing a lot of things that I didn't, I think before with my older son, even if I didn't admit it, I was always like looking for help. And I think that was part of the reason why I even got married again, was that this person presented themselves as very matronly and into being a mother for my son. And even if I felt like we had issues or that we didn't really connect 100%, I was like, oh, look how good she's treating my son, and I need this. I need someone. He's got special needs. I'm on the road all the time. And now watching him get older and turn 21, I'm just like, man, like he's the best roommate, the best dude. He's strong. We don't need help. Would I love a great partner? Absolutely. I think that would be wonderful. But learning that I'm enough on my own, that I like being in my own company. Just having to try new things. Like I've been doing jiu-jitsu for the past 1.5 years. And that really, not just like, because I feel like, especially coming in here, you're going to talk to people who, oh, MMA, UFC. I'm clearly not that type of guy, but the spirituality of it, the problem solving of it, the being willing to accept confrontation, willing to accept pain, to keep moving and not lose, is something that's taught me so much. I've learned to love myself from that, treat myself better, keep my schedule, do my Pilates, do my jiu-jitsu, go do mini golf. I don't just work, and then like I used to just work and buy gifts. And now I just, travel and have a good life balance for myself.
You have said that comedy is difficult on relationships of any kind.
For sure.
Can you explain why? Because I read some quotes from you in which, among other things, you said, well, I'm gone 15 days out of the month and I'm barely breaking even, which isn't something I associate with a comedian of
That sounds like an old quote.
Yeah, I was going to say, for your success, I don't think you were breaking even. Yeah, I don't think right now you're breaking even anymore, but the grind has a lot of barely breaking even.
Yeah. Oh, when you're starting, I mean, there's so many years of comedy where, you are. I was just going on the road for enough money to exactly pay my rent. It's sometimes where I couldn't even get a hotel on the road. I remember doing these college gigs and I would just hang out in the assembly room and people would be leaving and shutting down, and they don't know I'm still there at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. waiting to get an Uber for my 5 a.m. flight, because if I get a hotel, it's going to eat into my margins. And then just the schedule of it. And now I'm so feral. Like, I can't even I look at my house. I'm like, why would I bring anyone in here? We got to move around some arcade machines for your stuff. Get out of here. It's not happening. I travel so much. I like being by myself now. I do believe that I can certainly find love at some point, but I'm not in any rush for it. I'm finding love in so many, just in myself, and dates are still fun. I'm not having a problem with dating. It's just that, I do wish I had someone to share more victories and losses with that I want to share, that I want to invest in them and see them win.
Somebody who's not going to put their bare ass on the television when you're on Conan O'Brien.
They could do it if it's like a nice thing, sure.
When did you start to embrace your weird? When did you start to get comfortable with that? Because that takes some work.
Oh, yeah. Luckily for me, it was pretty early. I think that was the moving around a bunch from Chicago to Oregon. So probably like 14 through 16 was when I really started to embrace it. I'm going to get that time period where you kind of like put away things to try to get the opposite sex or same sex, if you're into it, interested in you. And I tried that for a minute where I was like, oh, I don't like wrestling. I don't like video games. I like whatever you like, What do you like, girl? What makes you happy? And then when that didn't work, after 6 months, I was like, I'm going back to what I like and what I enjoy. And starting comedy, I think comedy is very helpful for that. I think even if you don't want to do it for a career, if you have an interest in it, trying it for at least a couple of months will teach you like so much public speaking, just confidence in yourself, and just the ability to be like, this is what I think and this is what I feel. And one of the biggest lessons I learned in comedy was that, I don't need to try to come up with the wildest and biggest punchline. If I just kind of say what I feel in a rhythm, that usually hits more. And so that's really taught me to have more confidence in my point of view and what I believe in. And then I kind of tie it up with the jiu-jitsu now. So now I'm like, I can go on stage and say whatever I want. I could joke about abortions. I could joke about this or that. If someone has a problem, if they're not trained in jiu-jitsu, I could murder them. And if they are trained in jiu-jitsu, then I will back away.
The timeline sounds like, though, that you start to embrace your weird as you're getting beat up, as people are throwing pennies at you. Right? Do I have the timeline right?
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. Yeah.
And so how does that happen? Because that requires real strength. You're now alone. You're getting bullied. It sounds like some of your comedy does indeed come from the cliched pain. Mm-hmm. Not that your pain is cliched, but a lot of people say comedy comes from pain, mm-hmm. and it sounds like you had plenty of it. During those formative years, it seems like an odd time to arrive at, okay, I'm going to now embrace this. There seems to be real strength in that.
Yeah, well, what's the other option?
I mean, to be scared and miserable all the time.
That sounds bad.
It does sound bad. Yeah.
I think that really is it. There's a freedom to rejection, I think. And when you feel rejected at an early age, as much as it can be painful, or you feel like an outsider, I've always felt like I'm a hermit. I'm alone. I prefer to be alone usually. That's the thing that I feel a detriment to me possibly in a relationship, is that I don't know if I need to see anyone every day. That I can't fathom wanting to see someone every day. So I just think I learned to really embrace who I am, embrace myself. I don't really, I'm sorry not to answer the question probably, but I don't see another option. I think that's what's cool about life, is embracing you. I think it's so sad when you find people who still don't embrace themselves and they're in their 40s and 50s. And I think it's beautiful if they get therapy and they suddenly do, but the earlier you do it, the more free you are, the more you can have heaven on earth when you don't care about what other people think about you.
Do you remember what led you to therapy? Like, was there any moment?
Oh, yeah. It actually was when I met my second wife, because I was like, I really like her, and I have problems with intimacy and problems with keeping a relationship. So I want to go to therapy and work on this and kind of see what my issues were. And also I was just overworked at the time. There's a time where my entire rhythm was off. Like I had started to gain money, but I did not put any systems in place or use that money as a tool. So I was just getting my son up for school at like 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, making him breakfast, working all day doing auditions and trying to do voiceovers, then going out and doing shows at the Comedy Store and the Improv. And at that point, the Comedy Store was only putting me up at like 1 a.m., 1:30. So I was sleeping about 3 hours a day, working 6 to 7 days a week, and just like working myself to death. And so I went and saw a therapist because I was just burning out. And she just kind of was like, hey, why don't you have money, why don't you get a nanny? Why don't you have the nanny get your son up for school so then you can sleep and then you can go to work at a decent time and not have these issues. And it's just, it's one thing to think to get some money, but sometimes you need a little bit of permission to actually, at least coming from my mental state of like, I went from not having any at all to like the idea of having a nanny, having an assistant was very foreign. But now I love, that's if people are like, oh, where did you spend your money? What was the first thing you bought that when you got money? I was like, I got an assistant because I knew I don't like calling flights. I don't like calling Delta. I don't like figuring out where this bill is. I'd rather have someone else do that and free up my mind for comedy.
It sounds, though, like that is totally what would happen to anybody who comes from desperation. You would work because you're afraid of losing it all, and you would not spend any of your money because you're afraid of losing it all.
Yeah. Survival mindset. You got to go from a survival to a thriving mindset, knowing that money will come, knowing that I'm good at this job, that people want to work with me. But, you mix that with my original thinking that I'm a burden is difficult, so I have to always remind myself that people like you, people want to be around you, people enjoy you. It
speaks to me, though, because I started in therapy. I needed sort of a moment that I still remember, and I'm going to overshare here. And I'm going to overshare here at the risk of also making my father mad. But so he loses his job. His job has been his identity. We're exile family. Work is freedom. You've got to work. And so he loses his job at 57. And just something in him breaks, right? And he just falls apart. And I have to go with my mother to a psychiatric ward to go get him. And she passes out in his arms while we're there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to handle this the rest of the way. And so that's what ends up leading me to the exploration that I would, advise anybody to go get some help so that you can have some tools and look in some of the places that you might be blind to you just had no idea, where you needed help because you hadn't asked for it before.
Yeah, that's a strong shift. That's a tremendous shift that a lot of people go through, but I wonder about that for you, because most of us are aware of your dad and stuff because I grew up watching Highly Questionable and enjoy your work very much.
Thank you.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what I've seen in the past, you've always you looked up to your dad very much, right?
Yeah, well, that was our home. My dad might be somewhere on the Asperger's scale emotionally, and so my mother always sort of propped up the way that my mother got over her fears, right? Imagine being in a different country, you don't know the language, you don't have money, you're married very young, and you have a son, is by sort of propping up the father figure as something to aspire to. And so, of course, I looked up to it because she admired her father very much. But in therapy, I don't know if it's what it's taught me most, but certainly I just had no idea what my patterns were. I didn't realize how many places that I was looking at things incorrectly just because it's what had been handed down through my entire family. And so that part has just been hugely helpful to me to notice some of the same stuff. You came to it. I was in my mid-30s, so it sounds like you came to it at about the same age. But it doesn't sound like you had, any kind of seismic moment that sent you there. You're just sort of like, I need to get more balance. I'm going to fry. I'm working too much.
Yeah, no. I've had enough seismic moments. I didn't need to add that one for that, but it was just the feeling that I have more money. I have more freedom. I'm doing the job that I want to do, but I'm not happier. So what's going on? And so it was, really feeling like the burnout, the amount of work that I was doing, the fact that I wasn't saying no to any gigs, that I was doing everything. And so, which is now, kind of re-triggers me because I have to, outpace my money output for the lawyers and stuff. And so I'm kind of slightly back there, but I have to remind myself that it's more short term and that it's not like I'm just doing these crappy gigs. I'm like going on fun game shows. But so it's but it is certainly re-triggering.
I don't want to be too invasive here.
I love it.
But it sounds like being in the middle of a messy, difficult divorce, it would be hard to be happy.
Yeah, it was tremendously hard.
But you're saying, right? You're saying that therapy has helped you. Therapy has at least in part helped you because you're like, why am I not happier? I should be happier. You go into therapy, and now you're going through a divorce that's hard while also being happier. You are a happier person, but this is going to be a battering to your happiness.
Oh, absolutely. It's but it's an obstacle. It doesn't shake my happiness. It's just this. It's a correction more than anything. Where I was all out of balance before and not paying attention to red flags and just ignoring it. And so to me now, it's just like, oh, this is the positive. The divorce sucks. It's painful, and I don't like it. But it's authentic. And I think before I was getting a little bit away from my authentic self, as a getting more successful and then the way that she treated things more as a product and more about how appearances. And I've always been more about like, I don't care about appearances. I care about what it is. I care about being authentic. And I was straying away from that. And so now I'm back completely. The therapy for sure has helped. This is my second divorce, and I credit at least going through my first divorce about teaching me how to handle it a little bit better. I didn't have so many things in place for my first divorce, so I was a little bit weirder. I was a little bit more self-destructive to myself. But as soon as I realized that this was probably the route that it was going, I was like, let's get this jujitsu going. Let's call Donna, get some therapy sessions on the book, tell my friends. Let's also book some concerts. Let's book a trip to Japan. Let's do these things because you're going to freak out, and have this plan in place. And I think that's been such a difference for me of being like, oh, I know I'm going to be sad. I know this is going to suck, but it's not who I am. It's just something I'm going through.
How are you self-destructive?
Before? Oh, eating, overeating, and then like sleeping with anybody that wants to sleep with me.
I've had weight problems all my life. I have not gotten to the roots of mine, even for all the therapy I've done. I have not. I don't know why it is that I've struggled.
There is roots. I feel like some people, food just tastes better to them than others. Like, like you see somebody, they just take. I have a friend, and they'll just take a bite of a cookie, put it away, and I'm like, what? How did you do that? You're gonna eat it 2 days from now? Like, no. Once I open the bag, whole thing is gone. And so I'm learning more to like treat myself, have one single serving of a thing. I don't buy a bag of cookies, and I used to get mad at myself of being like, oh, why can't I be the guy who has a bag of cookies and I'll just put it away? And now I just embrace my character sheet. I embrace who I am. I'm not trying to fix every aspect of myself. I just want to understand myself. So if I just can't have a box of cookies in the house, then I will go to a bakery and buy one single cookie, and usually it's better for me. But I don't know if I need to know the exact root. I don't know if that'll fix anything. I think that's actually I went on tour with Conan, and we would share. We were on his plane, or I don't think it was his plane. He was renting a plane, and we go back and forth, and they have all this food and these pies and treats, and he has it for everybody else. And then I'm looking at him, and he's going in his little bag, and he pulls out his, little protein shake and diet food. And I was just like, oh, I go, you? And he's like, yeah, man, I struggle with this too. I struggle with all day. He goes, you think it will go away? He goes, not, you just keep dealing with it. And to have someone 20 years older than me going through the same issues, dealing with it, but having a handle on himself, it taught me like, oh, I don't need to fix me. I just need to know who I am.
He's a genius.
Yeah, truly.
That guy, I don't even understand how he does what he does because he's an improvisational genius.
Yeah. What I like about him, too, is that a lot of those improvisational geniuses and a lot of those Ivy League geniuses are sometimes cruel and mean in their humor, or think that they're better than other people. And you don't get a single drop of that from him. Anytime I've seen him, one of the greatest joys was that I got to see him in public, and because he's so tall and so easily recognizable that people would recognize him all day and talk to him all day, and he never disappointed them once. No matter if we had just finished a show, no matter if it was like 6 a.m. and we're getting off a flight, if he was noticed and somebody wanted to have an interaction with them, he gave them what they wanted. And I think that that's such a selfless and beautiful thing.
Seems exhausting, though.
Oof, yeah, truly.
You had told Adam Carolla that you got up to 360 pounds at one point.
Yeah.
What was happening in your life then?
Oh, what was happening in my life? Oh, money. I got money, but no change in my life at that point, because I was still had my bad eating habits, but they were always offset by the fact that I was poor, and so I could only afford to eat like a $5 burrito a day, and I'd split it up. I go to this same truck near my house and started to learn about the people there, and they were always super cool to me and hooked me up a little bit, but that would be my meal. And then I started getting money, and I was like, oh, I can now have that burrito by itself for lunch and another one for dinner. I can order a Philly cheesesteak for lunch. I can get whatever I want. And I had no type of discipline set at that point. So I went from being probably around 300 to, 360, 370 at my heaviest. And it was lucky that I was working on a show called Undateable with Bill Lawrence, who went on to make Ted Lasso and Shrinking and all these other great shows that people love, and Scrubs before that. And he was one of the kindest people I ever worked for, because he would see me at the gym kind of working out a bit, and then I'd go away, we go on hiatus, and I'd come back like 10 pounds heavier, and he'd be like, hey man, I see you working out all the time, but I don't see anything happening. And I go, he's like, if you want, I work with this trainer. I've been working with him for a while. It's like, I'll pay for it for you if you want. And so he paid for a trainer for me for a year, helped me get the tools that I needed. And then I was able to afford to keep him on for myself. And we just kept going for a long time.
Your resume is really varied. So if I go and give you some of the list here, if I say you worked with Eric Andre, Chelsea lately, you got Trolls, you got Blackish, you got Chopped, you got Loot now, Portlandia briefly, Inside Out, to where do you look and say that's the most fun I was having? You mentioned stand-up comedy, obviously, but in these other settings that you've ended up, what is the environment that you've found the most fun in?
The most fun right now is for sure Loot. Yeah, Loot's amazing. Again, as a fan of Lucille Ball and watching I Love Lucy, I've told Maya to her face, I was like, this is probably like the closest I'll ever get to working with Lucille Ball. It feels like that. It feels like I'm on set with a genius, watching them try new things and figure things out. And and I learned so much from her, from not just on a comedic sense. And if anything, she teaches me to trust my comedic sense, because she'll ask me a question, and she'll try a joke, and if I laugh, she'll go like, "Oh, I know it's funny because Ron laughed." And I'm like, oh, she cares about what I think. And just watching the way that she's just a total boss, but like family first. Like, she never ever lets work get in the way of her being a good mom. And I learned so much from her, and everybody on the show is super funny, and I actually respect and enjoy. And that's probably been only 2 or 3 jobs where I like everyone. There's usually at least one person where I'm like, ugh, why didn't you go to acting class? You know, like, get it together. But no one is like that there. If you don't come in prepared, you're gonna get eaten alive. And at the same time, it's like so fun. Everybody's a bunch of nerds. We all just play Mario Kart together and hang out and have a group chat. And we got a lady there, the true Disney princess. It forces us to go to Disneyland with her all the time. It's like a dream come true of a job. That one's been the absolute best job.
Among all of the others that I mentioned, are they largely hugely positive experiences?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I don't really put I'm a good reader of people. I've turned down gigs with people I wanted to work with because there were other people that I was like, there's no way I would work well with them. I think I learned early, that's truly the only power that you have as a freelancer, right? To say no. So I try to utilize that when I can. But for the most part, they've all been positive. There's been a couple that I didn't enjoy at all, that I did just for money, but you learn that either you needed to or to not do that again, you know.
Any interesting stories from 80 for Brady?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, those ladies, so nice. You probably want football-based stories.
No,
but
I don't know. I'm not leading the witness. I'm just asking you. You don't have to give me a Tom Brady story. You gravitate toward women. I know they're smarter than we are. They're deeper than we are, and you tend to find places where there's great comfort around women.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, again, just grew up around my mom and my sister and my cousins. I feel more comfortable around female energy usually. So I agree with that. But they were amazing just because it's legends. Lily Tomlin, Rita Moreno, and Jane Fonda, everybody on the movie was amazing. And the thing that I've often found is that when you work with legends, they're usually the kindest people. And especially if they see talent, they get so excited because they're like, oh, here's someone that I didn't know who's good. And it makes them happy. And I just remember being on set there and being so nervous because they're all so legendary. And but I was like, oh, I'm going to improvise some stuff. I'm going to do some jokes. And just seeing them being like, oh, you're funny. You should do. And I'm like, I do comedy. I do.
So they didn't really know anything about you.
No, they didn't know anything about, by the end, they thought they all discovered me. And so
it's a great feeling.
It was a great feeling. And just them being like, hey, you're funny. Keep pitching jokes. Don't stop pitching jokes. And I knew they liked me because we finished the first day and they were like, are you coming back? Do you have more scenes? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, thank God. And it was just this nice thing of like, feeling, for all the times where I have felt rejected or I have felt not a part of the team, to be like, oh, legends like me. People like Maya Rudolph like me. People like Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda like me. They see my value, and that means a lot to me. Tom Brady, we were in a scene together. I did not meet him at all. He was feet away, but he was, how they treat him.
That must have been so fulfilling, though, if you're somebody who has an appreciation of women in comedy that goes back to I Love Lucy, to have those women anoint you. It had to be, I don't know how many moments like that you have had outside of, obviously Conan O'Brien hitting a table, you're opening, but you're opening your career. But how many moments have you had like that where you can point to the fulfillment of like, I can't believe that those people are accepting me?
One that always comes to mind was that I, in Montreal at the comedy festival that they had for many years, I opened for Dave Chappelle, and this was the year he came back. So it was like so much anticipation. So many people hadn't seen him in years do stand up, and I have to go up in front of him in front of this maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people, and I know they just want me off the stage. They want to get to Dave right away. Dave's been gone. We need Dave. I get to 2-3 jokes in, and I can feel the energy change to them suddenly be like, okay, who's this guy? We like this guy. Keep going. I could feel them like me more. And then by the time I'm wrapped up, I could feel they forgot why they were there. And I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I know I could not have done that probably for 20 minutes, but for 7 minutes, I made them forget that they were there to see Dave Chappelle, who they had not seen in years. And I was like, oh, I'm good at this job. So that's probably one. Yeah, that's one that always, that's more of a personal one because not many people will know that or see that or go like, oh, I forgot about Dave. But I felt it. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do this.
What would finish second place to that in just stand-up in your career of most moved or confident that you have felt in front of an audience where you're like, it's not merely killing it, but it's knowing, having the extraordinary self-aware confidence of like, it can't feel better than that.
Yeah, I mean, when I did my special, it felt like that, which was like in 2018. I had just been running it so long and been so excited about it that, yeah, we did the first set. Normally they do like 2 tapings. We did the first one and they're like, we got it. We'll do the other show, but we got it. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool. This is the best. This is a great feeling. With comedy in general, you don't have it that much. I mean, at least for me, because there's always new material that you're working on, and so you don't feel that same confidence. It really ebbs and flows. Some days I feel like I'm the best comedian in the world, and other days I'm just like, oh, I suck at this. I couldn't figure out how to properly enunciate my point. But now, like, I always try to have just little notches, and for me it's just, I hate to bring it back financially, but just buying a house, being able to buy, we're in our second house now, but buying my first house, going from not having anything to, and it was such a production to even buy it because they were like, oh, your credit's horrible. We're not sure you're going to get this house. And they're like, well, you should maybe go get a Macy's card, build your credit up a little bit. I go to Macy's to go get a Macy's card. They deny me. And I'm like, oh, crap. I'm not getting this house. They won't give me a Macy's card. But they did. They gave me the house. And I got it around Christmas. So I took my son, didn't tell him about it. And I just was like, hey, come with me. We're going to go over to a little trip. And I took him to the house and opened the door for him. And there's a pool, and I knew how much he wanted a pool. And just the way his face lit up and how excited he was. And then I kept playing pranks with him. And I was like, you know what? I don't even think I like this place. I'm going to go back to the other place, the apartment. This place is too big for us. And then he was like, no. And I go, no, it's not good enough. This is too much. I'm going to go. I go, you know what? You can come back and live with me in the apartment, or you know what? You can stay here and live here by yourself. And before I finish my sentence, he just goes, by myself.
It seems a torturous existence to have the negative bank account. Do you have any moments that you're remembering now that you could look at peacefully from this distance and be like, whoa, I was really scared then when I saw that my finances were in this condition? Being denied a Macy's card, it tells you something about your credit, but at that point you were already, safe. You were in a safe place. How about a less safe place that you remember?
Oh, yeah. Most of the first 7 years of comedy, very unsafe, just not knowing when I'd be able to pay rent. I just not being able to afford a second pair of shoes for my son. I always remember that. Just being like, he had 1 pair of shoes. And I was like, please don't outgrow these shoes yet. I need another week or 2 before you outgrow these shoes. I remember doing coffee house shows and stuff and passing a bucket around and then it coming back empty and being like, no, I told my son I'd bring back McDonald's, so I need you guys to put something in this bucket. And the stress. It was just, because everything was day to day on everything and always behind on rent and behind on everything. It was like jumping through fire hoops while doors are closing behind you. That's kind of how I felt like my career was. If I stop moving, I'm going to get murdered. So I need to keep moving, keep jumping through hoops till eventually something. And I think that's what the therapy was really needed, to be like, oh, you've made it through these hoops, and you have all these underlying issues that you weren't paying attention to. And once things slowed down a bit, this is how my therapist put it again. They were like, hey, remember, we're here. We're still here. We just let you keep living because you were struggling so hard. But now that we calmed down a bit, could you handle your eating issues? Could you handle your sleep? Could you handle your work-life balance? Could you handle your self-esteem? So I just think, yeah, it's been a big part of having some security so that I could then work on myself a little bit more.
The biggest motivator outside of your son during those 7 years would have been fear, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, it was the fear that stopped me from even starting comedy for a while, because it was my only interest since I was 5 years old, growing up watching I Love Lucy, and I was writing plays, I was writing jokes and stuff when I was a little kid. And so I either wanted to be a comedian or a pro wrestler. Those were my only interests. And so the thing that stopped me for so long was being like, oh, what if I'm wrong? What if I go to try to do stand-up and I'm horrible, and I have no rhythm, and I have no ability to connect with people, and then I don't know what I want to do with my life at all? So for a while, it was easier to know what I wanted to do and not do it, because then I felt like something was at least always there. Like if I eventually tried it, maybe I'd be good at it. But I don't feel like trying it right now, because I was really afraid that if I did try it and didn't like it, what would I do? And then once I did try it and I did like it and embraced myself into it, it was really like, yeah, if I stop, what are my options? I don't have a college degree. I don't have interest. I don't have anything else I want to do. I don't have a family job to go into. I don't have any of that. So it was pretty much like I had to do it.
When you're not sleeping during those 7 years, is it because you're always working, or is it because you're so anxious that you cannot sleep?
It's a mix of those things. And also my son, when Malcolm was younger, he barely slept. It actually helped train me, I think, for being on set and doing stand-up. Being able to get up at 5 a.m. But there was a time period where when he was between 2 and 3, right before I started stand up, where he would sleep every day from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. And that was it. And there'd be no naps, no nothing. Just he would pass out at 2, wake up at 5. And it drove me crazy for a while. Yeah.
You mentioned wanting to be a professional wrestler. You did try wrestling for a while, correct?
I did.
How long?
I went to school for a few months, and then I did one match that I did at an independent company called GCW. And a great time. It actually helped me a lot in my comedy, helped me change my mindset about, before I was always just about setup, punchline, about the jokes. Going to do the wrestling and seeing the people react when I got hit and I fell, I was like, oh, I like that they care about me. I like that they're worried about my well-being. And it's taught me to kind of now, I guess for lack of a better word, try to manipulate my audience, not just for laughs, but for to get them invested, to get them scared, to get them angry. Like, those are things I want to play with more now than just being like, make you laugh. And so the wrestling was a big help with that.
Why only one match?
Because there's not much money in it. And I didn't get hurt at all. And if you do wrestle a lot, you do get hurt. One of my best friends is a retired wrestler, and he ripped his butthole open. And I don't want that to happen to me.
Yeah, that would be bad. That sounds like a painful injury.
Yeah.
The ripping of the butthole
Yeah.
open. Did you have a character? Did you have a name? Did
No,
you have
at that point, there's enough of comedy that I knew to keep it all together. But when I was younger, it was always just Ron the Reckless Negro Funches, who lived on the Oregon coast stealing blackberry pies out for windowsills.
Wrestling's racist as hell.
Yeah, it would have worked. It would have worked so much.
Wrestling is one of the great safe havens for just, the characters are racist. They're stereotyped. Yeah, were there rejected characters? Or that's just the one you decided
That
on?
was pretty much it from the get-go. It just takes a lot of effort to focus on comedy and stuff. I don't want to also be a wrestler who's trying. No, that doesn't seem right.
How did you end up losing the weight? How did you end up getting, you mentioned Bill Lawrence and a trainer. You just ended up figuring out some of the things, because you lost, about 140 pounds?
Lost 140. I got down to about 211. Now nowhere near there. So I put on some weight again through the divorce and the pandemic. So it's a constant battle, but yeah, I did it. Just change. My diet was horrible before. I drink like 6 sodas a day and just eat horribly. And so just learning how to meal plan, grill my own food, which also slows me down. I've been really learning to enjoy that I like to go home on Sundays and grill some chicken thighs, grill up some veggies, and just meal plan and relax and just enjoy my day, smoke a little joint, and it's like relaxing for me. It makes me feel at peace. So doing that, Pilates, jiu-jitsu, Zep-bound, like mixing it all up,
Take me through some of the worst jobs you've had outside of comedy, because I have one in mind that you don't think of as a bad job because it helped you with performance, but it sounds to me like a bad
Liberty
job.
tax sign twirling.
Yes, you were Lady Liberty.
Yeah.
You were dancing in the street to lure people into Liberty tax service. That sounds like it would be the worst job. Is it not the worst job?
It was worse in some ways, in the fact that the outfit gave me MRSA in my face, and I almost died from it. But then it also cleared up my skin, and so then I don't have pimples anymore, and I have like movie star skin now.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of playing Lady Liberty on the street.
Yeah. It gave me a staph infection in my face, ate my whole face. I used to have pimples everywhere, and then it went away, and I was like, oh, that was horrible, but worth it in the end. The job itself, not the best. It's not good because it was next door to a check cashing place, because those are never good places to be at. No one's doing well at the check cashing store. But I
really is a receptacle for sadness. The
truly
check cashing store.
Yeah. Yes, it's the worst place to be because no one's got an active bank account. If you're there, everybody's willing to lose 3% of their check. So I needed some money. This was the point where I was probably doing comedy for about 5 years or so, but no money is coming in, and I just was like, but I couldn't do a regular job because I had so many gigs. So I found a place that was like, hey, if you just call in when you want to come in, all you got to do is be willing to dance in the streets for an hour. And the entire interview process was being willing to dance in the street for a half hour for free. And so if you did that, they're like, okay, you got the job. And it was embarrassing, especially because this was in the town I went to middle school and high school in. And I'd see my first wife's mom driving by, and she'd see me in my Lady Liberty outfit, and she did not seem happy. She seemed like she thought her daughter made a terrible mistake. And so... But other people would see me, and they'd smile, and they'd laugh, and they'd be happy. And I learned to dance and just be joyful in front of all these people in places that most people would seem to be so embarrassing. And it really did. I would every day be like, oh, if I can dance in this dress in front of my high school classmates and my or at the time, my wife's mother, who was scowling at me, then I can go on stage and say whatever I want. Why wouldn't I be able to? This is way more embarrassing. So it was a horrible job, but it definitely prepared me for the future. I remember one of the first things I did that people still talk about was I played a homeless guy on New Girl who had to shirtless dance in front of Lamorne Morris and his date. And I used that exact memory of being Lady Liberty to be like, oh, you've done this. You've done this before. You may not have had your titties out, but you've done it before. So do it now.
Seems like you have found positive in some places that aren't positive, whether it's
for
the
sure.
check cashing place. It sounds like you're good at that. I mean, if you've got movie star skin because of something, I didn't even realize that when you're getting pennies thrown at you, you'd left that information out. It's not just that you're heavy, you don't have friends, you feel like you're a little weird. You also have acne. You also
when you
have
put it all together in a sentence, Dan, you really made me depressed when you said it like that.
I mean, no wonder you had some, like the formative years have all that self-esteem stuff. That's a lot, dude.
It's a lot. Okay, Dan. Well, I want to talk to you or ask you about your shift from ESPN to here, because one of the things that I like when I watch you now is this nice mix of slight bitterness, mixed with like you're still having fun and enjoying what you're doing, and then like hatred of your industry and the way things have turned. And as someone who works in comedy, I totally get that, and I find a kinship to that because I feel like, and I'm gonna make some assumptions, but like you have this like love for journalism and sports journalism and sports, and just as much as I have a love for comedy, and so you kind of grow up with this rule book of how things are supposed to work in your industry. And for me, it was always like, okay, you do this and you get certain goals, and then they give you a special and you do this, and then you see things change and you're like, wait, you're not following the rules at all anymore, and now you just want to do crowd work specials and be jerks to people, and that's how you can get a special, and then it just makes you frustrating. And so when I see you get so mad about your industry, it makes me feel good.
I wouldn't say that that I hate my industry. I may be repressing some anger toward my industry, but what I want to do at every turn is show people the changes and just make them aware of things and ask, are you good with this? Are you good with what's happening here? Because this should be a playground that does have a modicum of respect and treats the athletes who are partaking in something that is artistic and greatness. It doesn't have to be always cruel and criticism. It doesn't always have to be something that we're arguing about. You can, I imagine when you judge your industry and say, really, you're just going to do crowd work? I would say the same thing of my industry. Really? We're just going to find the places to blame everybody on things? We're not going to celebrate sports because it's harder? You don't want to try to do the harder thing because we all love this thing. It's a wildly profitable industry for everybody because the common thread is people love to laugh. People love sports. Shouldn't we celebrate this and then have the people who are, you know, curators? We're the curators for it. Shouldn't we be people who are celebrating the humanity of the athletes?
Do you see the shift that people are sick of the arguing and the what I would call inauthentic arguing when they are just kind of set up topics? Because I feel the more sports topics I watch online, or the more things that I see of that are not on like ESPN or not on Fox Sports or whatever, really lean the other way towards more like what you do and the more the authentic way, because I feel like that's what people actually want. But it feels that the people who work in those industries who are so caught up in the cycle of making that show that they don't listen to that. But it feels like when you hear the actual people, they're always like, this is fake, this is phony, this isn't a real argument, why am I watching this?
Well, I would say that that's probably the discerning that are doing that. Those shows still do well. I would say I'm disappointed that my industry creatively doesn't do better than that, because think about, I don't want to make this just a criticism of ESPN because there are a lot of all sports networks, but think about how few things are made by these networks that are 24 hours. Yeah. They have all these spaces, special things that like people really want to watch because they're saying they're great. There's sort of a lowest common denominator that you have to partake in order to get ratings that reach a lot of people who are at home during the day not working, right? The advent of this during the Tebow mania and everything, you're grabbing people at a time pre-pandemic when people weren't working from home. You're grabbing people who are home from 10 to noon watching television. And so those people aren't working, and you have to, I don't know. I don't know how many people know that some of it's fake, just like with wrestling. I'm not sure you're doing that, but I don't know if the majority of people. I'm happy to see that some independent people have broken out, and now people go grab what they want, like they're doing menu items because there are more options. But I think the linear options for now are still in a safe place, right? I don't
know if I'd call it safe. It feels like the industry continues to constrict and get smaller and smaller every day. But because I feel the same way, like, I mean, just what you said about you have all these hours, and like trying to pitch original programming right now is pretty much a deathbed, because you go and all these places that used to be where I wanted to go so bad, like having a special on Comedy Central was such a big deal to me, and I wanted to have a show and I wanted to do these things, and now you go like, oh, they don't have shows. It's just The Office 24 hours a day, and it is just this big shift away from network or anything towards streaming. But now the streamers aren't disruptive anymore. Now they're acting like the networks used to, so it gets frustrating. But then it's why you're on YouTube and you got the internet.
I didn't know, though, that you looked, I'm not going to say look down on your industry, but you also want your industry to be better because you grew up admiring your industry and you want it to be what you thought it was.
Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, right. That's the end of it. You go in there and you go like, wow, when I was a kid, it just seemed so glamorous and lovely, and maybe people had these shows and these specials, and it was so beautiful, or it seemed to be. Maybe there's always issues, I know, but yeah, to see it change in the way that it changed so drastically from like to where now it doesn't even feel like there's any type of discernment about your material, about what you're putting together. It is just about your social media numbers. What are you bringing to their streamer to add to their numbers? Where, as I was aware when I was younger, at least, it was about like development. Like, oh, this person's talented and they're great and they could serve an audience if we also lift them up. But now nobody seems to want to lift anyone up at all. It seems like they're all scared about their jobs. And so if you don't have a big audience right away, or have someone representing you, or you're part of the like Rogan Spear and stuff, then it's hard to make waves otherwise.
Is that where you saw the shift? Where did you see the shift? Because the industries can be similar this way. There are plenty of people having wild success in comedy, doing things that are in a different space than they've ever been. And you're sitting here saying, I want craftsmanship. I want to admire a sculptor on stage that I know has spent 50 minutes really working that material the last 18 months so that every note is in the place it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like what you say, that I want that, and then I go like, oh, it doesn't seem like that audience cared. They liked what they got, and a lot of them showed up, even if it wasn't that. So, yeah, but I like craftsmanship. I love seeing, I like the word special. I mean, people always go over it. I'm not trying to judge who does what, but I liked it when it did mean something, when you're like, oh, I'm gonna get something unique, something that someone worked on for the past 3 to 5 to maybe 10 years, and now you watch something and you're like, all right, that was just a set, that was just a thing that they put out, and you're like, why? What's the rhyme or reason to any of this? And that's one of the reasons I love jiu-jitsu, is because there is nothing but a merit-based thing. No one can give me a blue belt because I'm friends with someone. No one can teach me a hold because I got my social media numbers went up. You know, like I have to put in the work. I have to have the skill set, and I have to be a craftsman. And I do. I mean, that's the word exactly. I love being a craftsman. I love putting effort into this job. And so when I see it kind of shift away from that, it is, yeah, it makes me sad. It makes me feel, I used to always be, when I was starting out, I see these older comedians and they'd be so talking about the industry and how bitter they were. And I'd be like, I don't even have any money and I love this so much. How could you ever be bitter? And now I've been doing it for 17 years and I'm like, all right, I see.
Isn't it just money, though? Isn't the answer to your question just money? Like, seriously, like, you know what it's like to have money as a motivator. Isn't it? Couldn't I say parallelly that the reason this has happened in both places, in sports and in comedy, is because there's money in doing it without it having to be special?
Money and and I think in both, not to be rude, but like I've noticed that the streaming and the tech people got more involved in both,
right?
And they don't care about the craftsmanship about it. They care about the money. They care about the bottom line.
Well, that's throughout content right now, is it not? Right?
Yeah.
Like that's everywhere in content. I keep screaming to people, like, do you not see the danger? Like Silicon Valley has already eaten up newspapers. They ate up journalism. They're coming for all the others next, right? They've come for Hollywood. And, of course, it's the big corporations that are making a lot of homogenized stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any other questions? If you have any other, we could sit here and talk as long. I didn't realize you were fascinated by our industry. I didn't know that this was something that was also interesting to you. This is something I'm learning now.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I like, it's because I think it's very similar in that you were like, all right, I kind of don't like with this, but you can either keep working within that system. And one of my favorite things that I've learned to find out as I get older is like my talent, my drive, my work ethic won't beat a bad system. If I'm in a bad position on a show, or am I working in a place where they're not wanting to spotlight me, no matter how hard I work, it's not going to match up. Loot has been a godsend for me, but I get so many people. I had a conversation with an Uber driver where he was like, "Man, I've seen you for years. This is the first time I get you." And I was like, "Oh, cool," because this is the first time a show has decided to spotlight me and has decided to like research what I do best, as opposed to like I've been on other shows. I guess I could say because it's not coming back, it doesn't matter. Like I did many episodes of Blackish, and people would always on set, they'd be like, "Man, you're funnier when they call cut than when you're on thing." And I go, "Yeah, they don't know me. They don't know what to write for me. They know my name. My name is popping, and so they put me in this, but they don't know me. I would never be a guy named Ladarius. That's not me." And so I just learned that, but it's good for me, good to network, get my name out there, but I have to find a project that believes in me, gets my humor, and isn't just using me because other people like me. It's the same. It goes all the way around to dating, the people I'm around. It's like I used to be a person that like, okay, you don't get my value, I'll show you my value. And now I've really reached a point in my self-esteem where I'm like, I don't care if you don't know my value. I know what I am. I don't dress up nice. I don't, I've been out on the road many times where people hang out near the show and they think I'm a homeless dude hanging out. And I'm just like, I have a confidence in me. I don't need to show off. I know what I'm capable of.
What a great freedom that is, huh?
It is very nice to just be like, oh, that person has no, standard for me. They're keeping me very low. And then I come in and I'm like, oh, did you not see my Rolex? Like,
I don't hear a lot of comedians, I assume because they're scared of everything that Joe Rogan is and all of it. I don't hear a lot of comedians criticizing the Rogan sphere.
Oh, you don't? Because you do hang out with comedians?
No, I mean publicly. All right. I'm not going to get them in trouble. I know they do it in private. I meant publicly. Getting Better with Ron Funches, Loot on Apple TV Plus. And I will tell you again, ronfunches.com, tour dates and tickets. A delight, sir. Thank you. You're everything I thought you were. Nice talking to you.
A real pleasure.